Welcome. Hi. I love it whenever we can end up coming together with friends and neighbors and just saying hello and share some of our knowledge that we see every day as the norm that maybe other people don't. So I like, because my background is in interior design, I like doing the staging, I like doing the listing side, so I let Chuck kind of handle more of the buyer side. So today I figured I would just go through, because sellers, it's always a good time to sell. It's always a good time to buy. And if you end up listing and you have your house appropriately done, it has been proven over and over again that you can end up getting a higher net and you can sell it faster. Because once you decide that you do want to end up selling, you want something done pretty quickly. You don't want to sit here and drag it on through months or years, because then what happens usually whenever something sits on the market, it gets stale, and then people don't usually want to give you the money that you really wanted in the first place. So I just thought I'd share tonight a couple of tips. My part is going to be a little bit shorter because I myself would much rather hear from Jared from the Orlando Law Group about some of the things that he sees that today's market is all about. And then you all can open up, of course, to questions and anything that you specifically want to hear from him as well. So I figured I'd just kind of go over the benefits of staging. And again, these are all different quotes from different companies out there, that it is very definitely homes that are staged do sell faster and at a higher price. It is repeatedly over and over again for multiple different resources. So best returns on investment. You have yourself a house, whether you're going to be an investor out there or you want to end up selling your own house. What is the least expensive thing to do? Well, really, I switched the order on this earlier today because yes, the least expensive thing to do is to clean it. Yet, if it is really like an old rundown haunted house from the curb, nobody's going to bother to go inside and even look at the house. So it could be the most beautiful thing inside, renovated with all the top-notch thing, but they will not walk into it. They'll just kind of drive up and then drive away. So I switched it earlier and said curb appeal. So the least expensive realistically is clean up the front, pressure wash it, put some fresh little mulch and maybe some accent color flowers, and then you can get somebody, I mean, yes, realistically you can repaint it, but hopefully you can clean it and it looks good enough, but get them inside the door and then they can see all your renovations. So once that you do end up getting all the little mud wasps and everything else that we constantly see in Florida out of there, and then you can go in there. Well, cleaning and decluttering are both kind of hand in hand. We'll show you, and I love always showing some of the before and after shots of some of the things that I've taken care of. When, you've been there for 40 years or 20 years, and maybe you have some family items that you just can't get rid of. And so, yes, decluttering is proven over and over again how it would make the room look larger. And what happens when the room looks larger? People think that they want to purchase it because it is a deceiving way of decorating as far as decluttering and keeping it simple. And then, of course, when you have the finances, I remember one in our subdivision here in Carriage Hill, when they came to me one time and they said, okay, I got $5,000, that's all I could spend. I got to sell my mom's house. So yes, we had to get rid of the wonderful circuit breaker boxes that you can't get insurance on anymore. And I told them the second thing, paint. We painted the inside and out, and we got $15,000 higher than what we thought we were going to get originally. So again, it was a situation where you can end up making it look fresh, and all I could do is share with you over and over again what has worked for us to get the seller a higher net. So that, and of course, insurance is constantly changing right now as far as the age of the roof and plumbing. So that's what you have Chuck and myself here for, because we'll look at those things up front. So just again, the quick little reminders of things that you can do, even if you're not ready to sell now, your investment home or your permanent home, and later on, you can sit here and slowly say, you know what, we've got to really start thinking about this or this, because I want to make sure in any market that you get the higher return. So I just wanted to share some fun before after photos. This was one where you couldn't even see the house before we ended up putting a lot of sweat and equity in there, hired people as well as worked it, and at least we're able to see the house a little bit. You know, it's like one of those games. Can you see the house? No. And it was very interesting. So yes, curb appeal is very important. So landscaping is nice, yet whenever you need to have some, you got to make sure you see the house. Okay, Chuck. And then, of course, another one, most of these you're going to notice in our subdivision. So it's always nice when you can have a little bit of a pop of color. It attracts that curb appeal again. This is one that we had done, and all we did was just, well, there was a lot of stuff inside the house, but doing a fresh coat of paint. And it was really run down, as you can see on the left, and with the pressure washing. And then we just ended up putting pressure washing, putting fresh mulch, and put a fresh paint job, and it really popped it out. And we had a multiple offer situation on that too. So again, vacant, some people say, hey, I can sell my investment property and I don't have to put any furniture in there. So it's just asking you as a buyer, would you prefer to have something that was vacant or was something that had even a little bit of furniture in there? Most different resources that I have will constantly say, yes, people have a better feel of seeing themselves in there or what can be put in there if you end up having at least some light staging. So again, this was another one of those rooms that you can't really kind of see from this aspect, but it was like one big square. You wonder, where in the world am I going to put my furniture? So again, by putting something in there, even in a light perspective, you can end up getting the average buyer to be able to say, yes, I can put this and I can see my family living there. And again, this is just the staged versus not staged concept. It's just that small little feel of, okay, there's a little bit of color, I can picture a bed there. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular. It's just the concept of, oh, I see, you could put a queen size bed or a king size bed in there. So this is one that we had colorful walls everywhere in the house. So it's just asking you as a buyer, would you prefer to see a house with color or have it a little bit more neutral? Most buyers will end up putting a higher price in and sell it quicker. As soon as we ended up getting all these bright colored walls slowly and surely painted throughout the transaction, we finally got an offer on it that she was happy with. So I'm not saying it, I'm just proving to everybody from my examples what has worked. And then again, it was this one that did just want to replace the carpet and replace the wall and then kind of put some fresh look and getting rid of those blinds. If you're going to end up selling the house and you don't live there, remove the blinds. It makes it nice and bright. And again, we do have, this is my example of the family lives there. A lot of people lived there in the family, and I said, you know what? You've got to get rid of some of the stuff. So they found a smaller table and they got rid of a lot of stuff. And again, for photos, for selling, they want to make sure that that room, because the room on the left looks like the room's very small. So you want to make the room look as big as possible when you're selling. And then I constantly like to use the seller's own furniture. And so that way, all I do is go through and say, I can recommend you get rid of this, or you keep this, or you move this here. And then that way, they are using theirs. They basically boxed up most of their things. And then that way we're able to sell the house and give people that idea of it being a larger house. And again, a good example, they have a lot of family stuff in there that they had to live with, that they had to also learn to pack up early before we actually took photos. So again, I just wanted to make sure that you know that the closer that you have as a model home look, the better. I don't care if it's a 50-year-old home, but if it looks like what they would see online in a model home or on HGTV, that'll be the closest that you would get them to say, okay, there's a multiple offer situation, and pricing it right is very important as well, because no one's going to ever want to spend more, even if it looks like it's a brand new model home. So I just like to remind people about that. So yes, these are all the stats as far as that 95% of the staged homes, they do sell above list price. So basically pricing is very important. 97% of buyer agents said that selling the staged home made it easier for a buyer to visualize the property of the future home. And staging, it has been proven over and over again that you can get 1 to 5% more than non-staged homes. And these are all stats that are on the National Association of Realtors website. Okay, go ahead. So these are, you can go through these quickly. It's just basically how quickly, once it got staged, it did actually sell. And those are those charts there. And then what the different, the more stats, basically telling you about how the vacant property versus a staged property. And then the consultation price. So it's definitely worth it, because if you can get 1% at the least for, let's say, the average price of $400,000 home, and you're going to end up putting a fresh paint job, you know you're going to get at least $4,000 more. You might as well go ahead and put that fresh paint job and hopefully get it even higher than that. Okay, go ahead. So that's the same concept. Doesn't matter what price point it is. I don't care if it's a $100,000 condo or if it's $1 million home. The same concept goes there as all the different things you said. Now, yes, I do end up offering my, whenever you use me as a listing agent, I end up giving you a consultation for free. So that way I can end up saying, these are the suggestions, yet if you want to end up having some, like for some vacant homes, it's just like, I can't just let it be sold vacant. I have to go at least put some pictures on the walls, you know? So I do a lot of things like that just to kind of get it a little bit more humble and lived in look and make people feel like, yeah, they can live there. So if you do need to end up hiring a stager, we do that ever so often. We'll just hire a company, and that can be $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. Yet it's just the concept, do something. Otherwise, if you just sell it as is, which I understand, there are some cases where you just, sellers do not have any choice. They have to sell it as, damages, whatever is in there, they cannot do anything. I will do everything I can to at least get them to, even if we have to end up hiring someone ourselves and they just pay that company at closing, get it at least cleaned up and get it as fresh as possible, just for everybody's sake. Okay?
I think that's it.
Is that it? You got it. So if you have any questions, I know this was very short, and a lot of this could be something that you already know, but I just wanted to let you know those are the kind of general tips that I have, and I would be very happy to look in every situation specifically, whether you need some help here locally, or we do end up partnering up with a lot of agents that are around the country. So it's the same concept, what I've been talking about with people around the country, and so I'd be very happy to partner you up with someone I trust. So that is me, Deborah Morris, Keller Williams. Yes, Ann.
What's the difference between you and Open Door, where they buy it sight unseen?
Well, again, there are investors out there, some of them larger, like those companies, and some of them smaller, that will go in there and buy it, not really necessarily looking and having inspections. They just kind of buy a little bit there, and hopefully it averages out that they make money. Now, unfortunately, some of the larger companies have not been doing very well, because the market has flatlined. It is not going up as high as it was, so they're losing a lot of money. And so all I say is be wary about that, because a lot of times there are some hidden things in the paperwork.
My son sold his house. He lived in Longwood, estates of Spring Landing, and he got an astronomical amount of money last year.
Well, that, yeah.
Last year he would have. He wouldn't get nowhere near that now.
Yeah, for example, there's one in our subdivision that one of the bigger companies had purchased, as is. They ended up purchasing it higher than a lot of the neighbors had purchased, and it had a lot of repairs to do. They ended up doing, there were a lot of repairs. Groundwork, foundation repairs and everything. So they put all the money in. When it finally sold a year later, it sold for less than what they bought it for.
Yeah. Well, he's a superintendent of electrical services.
Sure.
Electricians. He just did it all. He says, I'm going to just make sure it looks nice. And he went in there and he painted and he did all that stuff.
I would just say,
And what's the difference between using a professional mechanic and a shade tree mechanic? You're going to get what you pay for.
yeah, if
You go to Open Door, you go to all these different iBuyers, that's what they're called. You know that Zillow stopped buying homes, you know why? Because they were losing money. They were paying way too much for homes and they couldn't sell them. So what's the difference? Do you want someone that's not going to give you what your home is worth, and when they make you a promise, they come back and start asking you for $30,000, $40,000 to fix this and to fix that?
Well, he paid $269 and he got $600.
well, I think that's great.
I think that was When the market was better.
If, as in, every real estate transaction is unique. So if you have enough experience, then you can be at the inspections and know what you're getting into as far as repairs and the market and taking the chance, then great. If not, then get somebody that they trust, as far as like us as realtors, to be able to say these are your rights, and then that way you can make sure that we can at least cover some of the possible mistakes that happen afterwards.
Sell our home this year, maybe.
Sure. Well, all I know is we'd be very happy.
Home that you can get?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you want the
yes.
one? Okay,
So
are
if
you
you
going to
get
settle for
another
someone
home-
who knows your home?
Sure.
Or are you going to settle for someone who's out of town and just sends you something over the internet?
Yeah, knowing you personally versus a larger company is your choice as far as what you prefer, but we can talk later on about that, and we'd be happy to. All righty, thank you. And now I'm going to turn this over to Jared from the Orlando Law Group.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jared Etheridge. I'm a real estate attorney with the Orlando Law Group. The Orlando Law Group's a full-service law firm. We can help with pretty much anything: property, family law. Pretty much everything. We have 4 offices: Altamont, Waterford, St. Cloud, and Winter Garden. So we're all over the city. Just to kind of touch on your question there, those companies are investment companies, right? So they have to build in profit margins. So typically they're not giving you full dollar for your property because they need to make money on it. Whereas agents are trying to get the highest dollar that you can get for your property. Appreciate Ms. Morris having us out here, and Mr. Morris. They want to talk about ways to expedite closings, right? There's a lot of issues that arise during a closing that can be addressed way beforehand. And a lot of times you see that. You get a seller under contract. We have actually closed one of her deals where, the seller came to me beforehand. We structured the deal. They closed it really fast. A lot of times people don't think that through. So, different things that you can do to speed up your closing process. So first thing, if I wanted to sell my house, like you'd mentioned you're thinking about selling, 3 months out, I'm going to her and I'm ordering a title search. So she can go to her title company, they can set up the file, go ahead and run the search. I want to know what's up with my property. I want to know if there's anything that I should be worried about, because you're 3 months out, you have 3 months to fix your issues, right? Probates, things like that can last 6 months. I don't want to wait until I'm 3 weeks away from closing to find out I got to wait 6 months for a probate to finish. So I'm going to touch on a couple different things. It's a diverse crowd, so if you guys got specific questions, I'm more than welcome to help with that. Otherwise, I'm just going to rattle off a couple things. But the first thing that I notice is wills. Everybody has a will, or their parents have a will, and everybody says, all right, I'm good because my will is directing my assets at my death. But most people don't take into consideration that a will does not avoid probate. So once you have a will, I have to get a judge to admit my will to a probate court in order to rule that my will is valid. So just having a will alone does not bypass the probate process. So a will is really good for personal property, jewelry, art, something that, there's no way to set aside a beneficiary for it, but it's not always the best decision for real property. It's also not the best decision for like investment accounts. If you can put a POD, a paid on death beneficiary, on your accounts, I would do that over a will. But a lot of times the issue with the will is they're not done right. So either the laws have changed or it's a different state that requires different things. So when I've worked in title insurance for about 6 years and I've been an attorney about 4 years, there's been a lot of times where a will is brought to us and they're going to probate it, and the will's not valid because it's missing a witness or it doesn't have a notary, or, well, actually you don't necessarily need a notary, but there's different things that, so, if you got a will or if your parents got a will you're relying on, bring it to us ahead of time, or bring it to Deborah's, whoever they're closing that deal through, and let's make sure the documents are valid, right? And a lot of times, it's imperative to go before the issue arises. So if you don't have a will, if you have a will, you're gonna have to probate it. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with probate, but probate's a long and expensive process, usually lasting 3 to 6 months, costing $2,500 to $5,000, depending on the assets in the estate. Probates, there's no way to get around on most of them at least 3 months, because there's a 90-day notice to creditor period. And so I have to provide notice to the creditors. I can't sell. Sometimes a judge will give you a workaround if it's homestead property, but not always. And I don't tell people to rely on it because it doesn't always happen, right? So probates, there's two forms. One is super expensive, super long. One is a little bit less expensive, not as long, but it's still going to run you 3 months to 6 months. So if you got a loved one, thinking that something's going to go wrong, you want to plan for that ahead of time. And if the will is the only thing they have, you might want to consider switching that a little bit, right? So the enhanced life estate deed is a great way to bypass probate. If you're not familiar with it, Florida is one of the only states that allows for an enhanced life estate deed. Now, an enhanced life estate deed, I am putting a deed into the public records right now to distribute the asset upon my death. So I sign it just like a quitclaim or a warranty deed. So I record it, but it doesn't become effective for however long until I pass away. Now, I can revoke that document. I can give it to somebody else. I can sell the property. I can mortgage the property. I can do different things with the enhanced life estate deed that I can't do with other types of deed. For example, if you do a quitclaim deed, you give the interest to somebody else, right? You retain no ownership of that property. You can't sell it. You can't mortgage it. So if you're giving it to your children, quitclaim deed might not be the best thing because now they own your house, right? So an enhanced life estate deed is a workaround to that, and it's for, $250 to $350 depending on where you go to draft it. You just bypassed the entire probate process and saved more than $2,000 and 6 months of your time. So an enhanced life estate deed, upon death, you can go right to her and you can sell your property. All I need is a death certificate showing that the person passed away and there not having been a revocation of that deed. Now, that's different. So the reason it's called enhanced in Florida, there's two different types. There's a life estate and there's an enhanced life estate. So the enhanced part means that I still own the property. I retain ownership. In a regular life estate, I give the property away and I retain a life estate in the property. Meaning if I want to sell the property, I got to go to the life estate, or the remainder men as they're called, and ask if I can sell it because it's not mine. I gave away the interest in my property. A revocable trust is a good way to bypass probate as well. So a trust is almost like an entity that's set up to take care of assets and to administer your property, both during your time of the life and after death, by virtue of the successor trustees. So a revocable trust is good, but it's not always necessary because there's other ways that you can get around it. If you only have one property, if you don't have minor children, or you don't have, if say you got kids that are grown, you might not need a trust. You could do an enhanced life estate deed, maybe couple that with a power of attorney for a lot less money than you would with a trust. Now, you guys got to be careful if you do a trust, or if anybody has a trust, state law varies. The document has to have specific wording for me to convey the property. So you might come to me with a parent's trust from California, and my underwriter says I can't accept it because it doesn't give them the certain power they need to sell the property. So if you have any parents, or if you guys are relying on a trust and you haven't had it looked at in a couple years, I would go ahead and recommend at least getting somebody to look at it, make sure that your document is still valid. Now, we run into a lot of issues with power of attorneys. So if anybody's planning on using the power of attorney, that's really good. Like, it's a great tool for if used correctly, right? But a power of attorney is almost always not used correctly. They bring them to me and they say, "Oh, my father signed this a couple years ago. Here it is." And they bring it to me, 2 weeks before they want to close the deal. And my underwriter says, "Well, it's missing a signature, or it didn't comply with this Florida statute." Well, your power of attorney is now invalid, right? And so if you have an invalid power of attorney, you can't rely on that document to have you sign on behalf of the principal. So what'll happen is now you got to probate, you can't probate because they would have to have been deceased, but you might need a guardianship. You might need some other type of legal case. And guardianships you want to avoid at all costs because they're expensive, they're time consuming, and they're going to run you probably 6 months and more than $10,000. Now, I don't do guardianships, so don't quote me on the prices or anything, but you want to avoid a guardianship. So just having the power of attorney may not be sufficient to do that. So for example, if you become incapacitated and your power of attorney, meaning like mentally incompetent, you can't make decisions for yourself anymore, power of attorney might not be durable. So there's a difference between durable power of attorney and a non-durable power of attorney, and it meaning non-durable becomes ineffective at your incapacitation. So if it's non-durable, you can make decisions for me during my lifetime, but you can't make decisions for me upon my incompetence, right? So if you're planning to rely on a power of attorney, get that reviewed before you come down to the situation where the situation to avoid is you get with the agent, you start doing open houses, you allow people in your house, you're showing it, you're entering into contracts or at least entertaining offers. Then you guys work for 2-3 weeks at that, if not longer. I mean, right now, I don't know how long is the market right now on?
Average days in the market is about 30 days.
30 days. So you get about 20 days in and realize, well, now you just bump back 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, or if it's a long probate or guardianship, could be a year. So you really want to make sure your power of attorney, if you're relying on one, is done correct and structured the right way. Sorry, I'm having a little blank there.
It's a lot to remember. I don't know.
I brought a script,
You covered
but
a lot of the things that I had asked you to cover.
Yeah.
As far as trust. Oh,
Yeah.
LLCs. Can you cover that as far as people that want to get into investment properties?
Yeah.
How you would recommend them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LLCs are a very good tool for investment properties. So if you don't have a mortgage, or if your mortgage company allows you to assign your mortgage to the LLC, you can put your rental property in the LLC. That's a downfall of LLCs, is it technically violates most mortgages because you're changing the ownership of the property. And so you can maybe get away with it, and if the mortgage company doesn't notice, or if they don't care, if you're paying your bills, they probably don't care, right? But so typically the LLC works best for cash properties. And what you want to do is if you have tenants in your property, right, get it out of your name. I don't want my liability attached to this property, because who knows what's happening, right? Like, it could be a mailman getting hurt, it could be a dog bite, it could be a fight between my tenants. And if somebody gets hurt on that property, I could be the one ultimately having to foot a bill for a claim. That's why you also have insurance, so you make sure you're kind of double protected there. But the purpose of the LLC is to get the property out of your name, so I can't be sued personally, right? I can be sued for the assets that are in my LLC. So if I put the house in the LLC, it's the only asset, and somebody tries to sue me for more money than the house is worth, so long as I'm using the LLC correctly, they can't sue me for more than my assets in that LLC. And there's a whole you get analysis that goes into it to determine all the factors, but it's a great way to take your liability off the property. Now, it is, when you put it in an LLC, it's going to be harder to get a mortgage. So if you're trying to leverage that to get a new mortgage, it is going to create you some issues. Tenants in the property is another one that I run into a lot. So a lot of people will bring an investment property to us, and they're like, we're thinking about selling, or they'll bring it to Deborah, and I'm like, well, you got tenants in here, your lease is under value, and your lease is for more than 6 more months, right? And so they want top dollar for their property, but I can't give you top dollar. Well, the investor won't give you top dollar. The issue with tenants in the property is that most of the buyers that Deborah is going to be finding for this property are getting a conventional loan, right? And a conventional loan says, if for a primary residence, I have to take possession of this property in 60 days. So you're telling me you have a tenant in there for 6 months, and I'm telling you as a mortgage company, you violate what I can lend on, right? So you're already scooping probably 60-70% of your potential buyers right out, because they can't get a mortgage on it. So you're going to be limited to companies like the Open Door or private investors to buy your house, and a lot of times they're not giving you top dollar for your house if it has tenants in there, especially if your tenant's lease is undervalued, or if your tenants have other issues, like if you got HOA disputes or material non-compliance under the terms of the lease. But ultimately, the biggest thing about real estate is waiting. People wait too long to make the decisions, right? And when you want to sell, you flip the script and you're like, all right, we're selling, right? We've been thinking about it for years. We're doing it. I want to do it within 30 days. And then you come to me and I'm like, I can't sell your property within 30 days. Actually, it's going to be 6 months, right? Or in a situation where there's a deceased family member and where you're inheriting a property, if you got to go through probate, you're talking about 3 to 6 months. Now, there's nobody left to take care of that property. So that's 3 to 6 months that I'm putting into mowing the yard. I'm paying taxes. I'm paying insurance. I'm paying homeowners association. So, I mean, you have the option not to pay, right? But then you're going to rack up more fees, potentially foreclose, depending on how long you take, violations from the HOA. So there's a lot of things that, you want to plan for in advance rather than wait in real estate, because that's where the issues arise. Contractors too. If you guys are having any issues with contractors, or say you got contractors working on your roof during closing, right, or during the process of under contract, that's going to be problematic. You guys are going to either have to pay them before closing, or I'm going to have to escrow the funds. And a lot of people don't understand that. I'll pay them outside of closing, but I'm issuing title insurance that this is paid, right? I can't have an open claim on the property when I transfer it to the new buyer. So, don't wait to do work until the month you're trying to sell the house. Putting up a fence, putting up a roof, plumbing, electrical, anything like that is going to lead to likely a notice of commencement filed on the property. And as a title company, I have to address that and work through it. So if you got your title search early, like if 3 months, 2 months, even a month early, like it doesn't matter. I just need it early. The more time that you have to address your issues, the more time it is going to give you, or the more efficient it's going to make your closing process. So the contractors are always big because they might be in dispute with their contractor. Maybe the work wasn't done the way it was supposed to be, and I've paid them some money, but I don't want to pay them all the money. That's not for me to decide as the closing agent or as the attorney, or or even Deborah as the realtor. That's not for me to decide. That's for you and them to work out, and you're going to either have to escrow that money or you're going to have to pay it off. And nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to, I'm just going to have to take them to court. Well, yeah, but you're not going to be able to close on the property if you're taking them to court. Talked about an owner finance situation. Owner finance is interesting, right? And the owner finances can lead to a lot of issues. So as I was talking to one of the people here, and they were saying that, we were talking about, in an owner finance situation, number one, the mortgage has to be paid off. You can't transfer the property to a new person with the mortgage unless the mortgage company agrees to it. Now, in theory, you can take it subject to the mortgage, which is what a lot of investors do, but you're running the risk of being foreclosed on. And it's not my property. It's not my loan, sorry. And they have first lien position that defeats my claim to ownership of this property. So one of the things with owner finance that you got to be careful of is if they breach that agreement, right now I got to foreclose. I'm a lender in this situation. So, you need to build in a certain amount of money to factor in if you have to foreclose. And we'd also talked about a rent-to-own situation, which is good. You give them an option to purchase, but what happens if they violate that option to purchase, right? They don't purchase it. Well, guess what? As an escrow agent, I can't determine who violated what agreement. So if they refuse to sign a release, even after breaching the contract that you entered into, that's not for me to determine whose legal rights that is, right? So I think that addressing a lot of your concerns, if you guys are looking to sell, the biggest thing to take away is to get with Deborah early. And that way she can address all your concerns, because you've gone through all of this. You've done your staging. You've hired your interior decorator. You guys are ready to close. And I'm like, nope, you're not closing today. Actually, you're closing 6 months from now, if you're lucky, because the judge operates on their time. I have no control over the court system. So if you need a probate or a guardianship and that judge is sick for a week or 2 weeks and they don't have a replacement, your case is 2 weeks back. That's out of my hands. Let me see, you guys got any questions? Any specific questions relevant to your situations?
I have a question. If we were wanting to sell in a year, how soon would you start the title stuff now, or how far out from selling?
That's a good question. It depends on your comfort level, right? Like if you, and it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, how long have you owned the property? What have you done to the property? What have your neighbors done to their property? Because if they built something on their property that's now encroaching on your property, I want to address that as early as I can. Title searches are typically about $75. So it doesn't matter when you run it. I mean, you could run one every year if you wanted to make sure. I mean, you don't need to do that, but if it's a property you inherited, I would probably run one early. I would way early. If you close through a title company, like say you bought it last year, you closed through a title company, you have not done any work, you've had no liens against it, you're paying the mortgage, I'd wait till maybe 3 or 4 months out to start looking into that. I certainly wouldn't do it a year in advance if you don't have any reason to.
I figured I'd walk up here too, just in case you had questions that I can answer too, and I'm close enough to the microphone. Hello?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, usually you end up, once that you know that you want to sell, you're usually reaching out to me in about 3 to 6 months before you're ready. I mean, right now you're saying a year.
Yeah.
So that way we can end up reaching out to the closing company with whatever information that you may have concern, whether it be a will or a probate or any kind of questions that you have, and just double check. I mean, I do that all the time. I call them up and I was like, hey, can you just make sure this is done right?
Yeah, and it's not even stuff that you're knowledgeable or you have knowledge of, right? Like it's the little things that contractors can file or HOAs can file. But I mean, probate is probably the biggest thing. Make sure you don't need to probate the property or a quiet title. Sometimes there's issues in legal descriptions and prior deeds, right? Legal descriptions, even a word like east, right? So the surveyor's moving along, they follow all this and it says turn a direction, but it doesn't say which direction. I can't trace my legal description. So now I have to do a quiet title. Quiet titles are gonna run you about 3 months. And maybe there's a new program actually out that's like 20 days, which I want to talk to you about because that's a new thing. But it's only accepted by like one underwriter, but it's still $1,000. So $1,000, 20 extra days onto that. But yeah, so I mean, get your title search ordered. Depending on if you've been in control of that property the entire time, 2-3 months probably be fine. If you inherited it or if you've owned it for 40 years, I want it way in advance. And I would pay out of my pocket $75 to know that I'm not gonna have to go through all the hoops and everything a year from now when I got my buyer lined up. Yes, ma'am.
I had my house for 29 years. It was paid off 19 years ago when my late husband passed away. And it's been fine ever since. I've had it
Has it
a
been
lot.
fine title-wise though?
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't know.
We have had additional, things added to it. We made a screened-in porch, and then we enclosed it, made a beautiful room, and we added a deck and a screened-in porch, and painted everything.
Well, it sounds like you need a title search way in advance. Well, all right, so she paid a mortgage off years ago, right? 19 years ago. What if that bank no longer exists, right? What if they didn't release that mortgage? How am I going to get a release of a mortgage from a bank that didn't exist, right? So do you know if they satisfied your mortgage in the official records? Why would you know that, right? So a title search will tell you that. It'll say I need either a satisfaction and release or it won't be on there at all. Another thing you said was building, right? So you've added different things. So you've had contractors on the property. Who knows what have been filed?
His son was, architect.
Okay. So, and another thing too, a lot of agents, like Deborah, when she's working with a buyer, she's going to be looking for permits. She's going to be looking for different things, right? So if there's a structure on the property that required a permit and you didn't pull a permit, I'm not buying your house, right? Until, well, right.
Adjuster for years and years.
Well, yeah, and if it was done right, then you shouldn't have any issues. But a lot of times, there's a lot of people out there who aren't doing the proper process for permitting or canceling or closing permits. It's different from opening a permit to finishing a permit, right? So what if your contractor's out of business? Now you got to hire a new contractor, reopen your permit, get it re-inspected. If it passes inspection, you're good. But if it doesn't pass inspection, you're going to have to redo that entire structure. right? So if the permitting process is something that my property needs, I want to know well in advance so I can start the permitting process. Because you don't want to get to closing, right? And especially if your contract's not contingent on something you had no idea was there, then have to be in breach of contract with the buyer, right? They're going to be threatening to sue you. They want their deposit back. There's going to be issues strung out there. So you don't want to have to tell them I can't close because of something I could have realized 6 months ago, or 3 months ago, or however long.
Just reach out and we'll be able to look things up to start, and then if we we can refer you over to an attorney. So it's just communicating.
I have a question. If you go on the property appraiser's website, do they show all the permits there?
No, permits are hard to find. You're better off going probably in person to the building department. It's probably located on the west side of downtown. Your house, actually, no, sorry, this is Seminole County. Wouldn't be able to tell you where Seminole County is, but you can call them. They can look it up. I prefer, when possible, to go into the office because you can get all of your questions answered because they have to address you when you're face to face, right? Phone call, they can shuffle me around. They can give me, half answers. But when I'm face to face, you got to answer my question. I'm just not leaving, right? I'm allowed to be here. But yeah.
Just reach out to one of us.
Yeah.
The property appraiser is a good way to show the chain of title so you can look at the deeds. So like if you're looking into an investment property that you want to purchase, I would trace the chain of title, and usually you can do that under like the sales tab on the property appraiser. Make sure that the person who was in this deed and then got it in this deed sold it here, make sure that there's not somebody missing, right? Because that's another issue is a lot of times there's a family member missing and I need a corrective deed or I need some kind of replacement or a fix to that, and that would also lead to a quiet title, another $1,000 that you weren't expecting.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Land trusts.
Yes, sir. What about land trusts?
What are your property land trusts?
Land trusts are good. They're very popular among the investors because it's anonymous ownership, but it doesn't provide the same protections that an LLC does. And just because it's anonymous doesn't mean that you don't have to disclose your assets. So like if I sue you and I win the case, I have to tell you about that property in the land trust. So it's anonymous at face value, but it's not fully protected, right? So there's a lot of reasons to use a land trust, but there's a lot of reasons that people use them for that an LLC might better suit you. And I would definitely be happy to talk to you about that. We could go in depth on land trusts.
Everybody get their questions answered?
In your firm, you set up all those things, so if you needed an LLC or...
Yep, so we do LLCs, we do all of the estate planning and real estate, and we have a title company as well, so we can close deals, and I can operate as a real estate attorney on the deal.
I think it's great. Why don't we say thank you very much, Jared. I really appreciate everybody being here. There we go. And coming and learning a little bit more, because I don't know about you all, but it's real estate and law change constantly. So if you have any questions at all, I know we're only able to touch, I know you said a lot of details that just have to go back and look at the video again to catch some of those and take notes. But please reach out to us. We're always a phone call away, and we'll have your the information to you. And I do appreciate you all coming. I'm hoping to do something like this every month to create value. So if you are looking for a particular if you're looking for a particular topic, please reach out and we will look into getting somebody that can cover that topic. So again, to have it on recording, if you want to call and talk to either Chuck or myself, it's 321-348-0014, as we also have up there. And then, Jared?
Yep, we could be reached at the Orlando Law Group, 407-512-4394.
There we go. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.